Okay, Cara is on her way to board a flight, so we just got the four of you for the Q&A, and we've got a lot of questions that I'd love to get to. So I'll start with Dominic's question. So Dominic's asking, what tips would you have for a startup building the first of its sales team? So what are the most important things to do? So let's say they don't have sales ops or sales enablement yet. Michael, I'll come to you first. What tips would you have for a startup building the first sales team?
The first thing I would do is understand the why and what. Why are you building it? I mentioned just understanding and working backwards from the overall targets, the business targets, and then match that to. There was a couple of the other guys just mentioned a couple of traits from SDRs and what you're looking at. I think when it comes to enablement, if you haven't got anything in place, I do think you have to take that on yourself. I've had to do it. It's very frustrating until you build out the enablement piece. But I think overall, you should be kind of leading that within the business, and then understand what you're looking to hire, and then go from there.
Okay. Brilliant. Dave, given your experience of building and advising companies on building their sales team, what would you add to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think taking like the SDR leadership hat off for a minute, if SDRs weren't in consideration just yet, I think when we look at like the sales team, I think it's important to bring in a profile type that can not only work in a capacity where they acquire new logos, but that they can actually effectively manage those logos as well. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback there. So if we're purely looking at like sales folks, I think it's important to have folks who can acquire logos, but also have that kind of skill and muscle to manage those existing customers, because at that early stage of a company, at that infancy stage, it's so important to understand what those customers who've taken a risk on us, what they like and what they don't like about our product. And I think that so the kind of the scope of responsibilities of a salesperson needs to be very kind of wide and deep, so to say. But let's fast forward that and say that the company's beginning to hum now. We're getting customers in at a predictable and consistent rate, and we're looking now at introducing SDRs. I think it's really important to have an established onboarding process for those SDRs, so that their ability to hit that optimal level of where the business needs is as short as possible, but also that it's scalable as possible. And thanks to the plethora of tools out there in the ecosystem, we can really leverage tools and to make sure that tribal knowledge and additional knowledge is always kind of shared with new hires, and that onboarding process is scalable and it continues to evolve over time. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great stuff there from you both, Dave and Michael. Thank you. Okay, Sean, we've got a question from Becca, and Becca's asking, how often would you recommend managers and SDRs to review their competency progress?
That's a very good question, isn't it? It's at first we actually started doing it on a quarterly basis, and then we realized that we suffered way too much from short-termism, like what were the things they were dealing with in that moment, rather than actually something more progressive. So we now do it on a weekly basis. Literally, with the managers, actually have a 4-week structure of one-to-ones, where in each one they cover different aspects of the funnel, from like accounts that are going in, calls, emails, and then we have a full funnel analysis at the end of the month. And within each one, we kind of check on certain competencies each week and build quantitative and qualitative next steps for the following one-to-one. So it's like a constant ongoing stream. It sounds very over-engineered, but we're still tweaking elements of it, but it's working pretty well so far.
Okay, I love that you do it weekly. Mallory, what's your thoughts on how often you should be doing that?
I mean, I really love that answer, and I was thinking along the same lines of not, move. Oh, hi, bud. Okay, we have a guest visitor. Sorry, team, everyone. This is JoJo. She probably has nothing to contribute to this conversation, but she has joined. But I was going to say something kind of similar to Sean, like don't move on to the next competency until you really feel like they've grasped whatever skill you're trying to focus on. So don't try to do too much too soon. And if you feel like we need to focus on reinforcing something, spend some additional time on that before moving on to a new concept.
Yeah.
And some people will grasp some concepts really quick, and others it might take a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But I really like the structure, the framework that you're using, Sean.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I've seen companies before use, competency scoring, and actually then when I say, okay, well, what does it take to move up from a 1 to a 2, and what are you going to do to help them? I don't know, right? So it's actually not just the scoring part, but then it's how do you plug those gaps as well. So yes, some great insights from you. We've got the age-old question from Dominique around what is the general expectation for how long you should be in an SDR, BDR role before promoting. And I know, this is something that people tend to always wonder, right? So how long should they be in the role? And my thoughts are that it's not a time trigger, it's a performance trigger. So Michael, I know you've got a huge SDR team at SalesLoft, so I'd be keen to know how SalesLoft think about this.
It's such a, yeah, I mean, Sean kind of nailed it with it's a topic that as managers, you're going to have to try and answer all the time. I wouldn't put a time frame necessarily on it. Again, it's about setting the expectations before you hire someone, because as a manager, the way that I look at it is I'm spending my time building them for their next role. So that's my job. And if I get 6 months out of them, 3 months they're in ramp. And then the other 3 months they're holding a full target. So technically speaking, I'm only getting 3 months out of an SDR. Yeah. So in my head, personally, I have 12 months minimum. And the reason that is because of the time and effort that I put into the SDRs through onboarding, training, etc. However, but one thing is to make clear is just setting that expectation from day one.
I like that. I like the way that you think about how long you have them there for and how you can make that most effective. Okay, we've got a really interesting question from Henrietta. Sean and Dave, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And Dave, I've seen the stuff that Gong Labs are putting out, so I'm sure you've got some insightful data on this. Henrietta's asking another question that comes up a lot, which is how effective are you finding cold calling? Henrietta's team is heavily email-based, and they're finding it quite hard to find accurate phone numbers, given the fact they target e-commerce and fewer people are actually in the offices. So there's two parts to this question. The first is how effective are you finding cold calling? And the second is where do you find accurate phone numbers? So Dave, I'm going to get your thoughts on this first, please.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So truthfully, we're in quite a privileged position at Gong in that we are predominantly selling to go-to-market teams. And so the people that we are calling are either overseeing a team that are hammering out the cold calls or are very close to that team. And so they're when I say that they're a bit more receptive to it, maybe perhaps to other industries and other channels, I would think that they are. And I think a good indicator that our SDRs are doing a good job is when they actually get job offers on the phone. It can be worrying at times, but it does happen. So we're in quite a luxurious position now. I haven't always worked in environments like this. I've worked in environments before where we've been selling to engineers, data scientists, and so on, where it's been, where they haven't been the most receptive to cold calls, and and that was even during the once kind of working from home was introduced as well. Look, I think the big thing is that we can, as SDRs, you can do your best to ultimately grab the attention of your prospects wherever they are across channels. And there's great tools out there to help us. Michael's here from SalesLoft. They can help us do that across email, LinkedIn, cold call, whatever the case may be, right? I think if we are successful in connecting with folks on a cold call, there is nothing more intense. There's nothing more intensified in that attention grabbing moment than a cold call. And I think that is where the kind of true kind of like, dare I say, like sales character or ability to kind of execute on the spot comes out. And so I think something that I really encourage SDRs to remember that, yes, it can be daunting. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, you can stumble across your words, but acknowledge that angst and try and flip it and say, shit, this is actually really exciting. I'm not in a room in the corner with the no lights on, hammering out accounts because I'm an accountant. No offense to accountants on the call. You know, it is an exciting thing to do. All right, it's an exciting aspect of the role because it's quite volatile and it can go one way or the other way. And that muscle needs to be built, and the way that muscle is built by doing it more often. So, yeah, I suppose I'm trying to go back to the first question. Sorry, the first question was, how do I find kind of selling into sorry, how do I find with regards to cold calls into the space that we're selling into? Again, we're in quite a luxurious position in Gong, but what I would say is, even in the world that we are in, irrespective of what area you're selling into, just keep going with it. Keep going with it, because it builds these skills and it builds this character that will stand to you in the rest of the career that you're in. So don't lose sight of that, and give your pipeline generation strategy and opportunities the best ability to be successful by executing those calls. So the second question, I'll be far quicker answering it. Data is always the hard one, right? Like, how do you find data? And I think people are a bit more sensitive about people calling on their mobile when they've never engaged in a marketing campaign, for example. So we're using the likes of Cognizant for ourselves out here in Europe. Data quality is pretty good. But again, we've done a pretty good job at kind of building that marketing strategy to get those numbers. So we're but talk to me in 12 months, and it might be a very different story when all the water's drained out from the well. So sorry, long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped.
No, that was good. There was some great stuff in there. Sean, what about you? I know your team are fairly active on the phones. How effective do you find cold calling?
We'd be very hypocritical if we weren't using the phone, weren't we? We're phone system. So I'd echo what Dave said in terms of data. It's very important. I think in terms of diversifying your data sources can be really good as well. So we use Cognizant, we use ZoomInfo, we try and get as much data as possible. And also when we're calling into different markets, we see where we get the strongest data for each market, because we haven't got their number to be an excuse not to call, because we know that cold calling is the best route in, it's the most effective. Emails are really just a way of getting people on the phone. It all comes to the phone. We also sell to e-commerce, I'd say, and we find that probably the best route in is sometimes bottom up as well. So calling into the people who are on the sales or support lines directly, finding out their experiences, getting more information from them. Even if you can get a number from someone higher up, great. But often just that information can actually help you tailor your email. But again, it all comes through the phone.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a big believer in the phone. I think our buyers today, their LinkedIn inbox is flooded, their email inbox is flooded. I get 10 cold emails a day, but my phone doesn't ring that often. So I think, and Dave, you alluded to this. I think if the phone is used in the right way, it can be a pattern interrupt in itself, right? And I think, I think it's super powerful, and it's what we encourage the SDRs that we train and coach to do as well. Okay, we're going to go one more question. We've got a question on experiences, guidance on comp structure. So fixed, variable, OTE, negotiating stock options, but if possible, any perspective on UK versus US comp. So a lot in there, but we were talking about this before this event started around SDR bases and hiring and things like that. So does anyone want to volunteer on sharing some insights and experiences on fixed, variable, OTE, stock options, and UK versus US?
I could speak. I don't really have experience around the US. At my last company, I was looking into expanding the SDR team to the US, so I kind of understand the basic salaries around like New York and things like that. I think we've all seen at the moment that, especially at the moment, I'm hiring a lot for like a recruiter. As some SDRs are looking around 60K for the base, and some companies will pay that. So it all depends. It depends from the company to company, right? Based on budgets. all depends on that. The way that I would look at it is go out, do your research, and find out what the industry are paying, what your competitors are paying, and kind of base it from that, because that's the only way you're going to really attract top talent if money's involved.
Love it. Thank you, Michael. The salaries blow my mind, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy. That's like 1 year's experience as well, and then they're asking for that. So
it is. I'll echo that in terms of just hearing some crazy numbers, and I think it could be good to counter that by telling some stories in terms of those who are the highest earners in your company as well, and kind of outline the fact you do set realistic targets, or we do set realistic targets. If you can have a differentiator in your package as well, maybe I shouldn't tell what our differentiator is, but we also have a percentage of closing for the BDRs as well, for the opportunities that they book, which isn't standard practice and is uncapped. So if they book a 10k MRR deal, and they'll get a percentage of that, and that can really add up. So something that makes people dream as well, whilst also being realistic.
Yeah, to that, what you were saying there, Sean, I'm a big believer of that of SDRs not only being comped out on kind of like opportunities created or qualified pipeline, it actually is having their comp tied to revenue that's closed as well. Look, I appreciate I think I'm a firm believer that if you can adjust the levers with kind of payout in the form of spiffs or comp to drive the behaviors that you desire, like it's a really effective lever to pull. But a lot of it depends on where you're at in your journey with your business. So let's say if you're a company starting from scratch in Europe or wherever the case may be, like naturally the behavior we want to get is as many logos as possible. So let's maybe tie comp to the number of opportunities and pipeline that we create in that kind of first phase of growth. But then naturally, once we've kind of got that consistent and predictable flow of logos coming in, maybe it's mid-market or SMB, and we want to start going into those larger segments, it can be a creative and effective thing to do to adjust part of the comp where they actually start paying out in the same way as Sean said to the end revenue. So the SDR has a vested interest in that the pipeline that they're generating is actually going to close and that there's going to be significant upside. So I'm a firm believer of adjusting comp to the behaviors that you need based on where your business is at in its growth phase.
Cool. I'm going to wrap it up there, I think. Thank you very much to Shabri for co-hosting today's event and for partnering up with us. And also thank you to our wonderful speakers, Michael, Cara, Dave, Sean, and Mallory. Round of applause. I'd love to have a drink with you all now, but unfortunately we've got to get back to our desks. This has been a wonderful event. For more information, you can watch back the full recordings on YouTube. So if you search Sales Confidence into YouTube, the recordings will be up within 48 hours. And also, if you visit www.salesconfidence.com, you can sign up to our membership, which is free, which gives you access to curated videos. I would recommend that if you're developing your SDR function, in need of training or consultancy, or looking at a full audit on what you can do, that you speak to Shabri and Cara about SalesWorks and what they can offer, because they're a super supportive organization. So once again, thank you, everybody. There is an opportunity now, if you're going to hang around, to head into the networking area. So there's a tab under the stage on the right, which says networking. We're going to finish this main event here, but what I expect is to have lots of conversations with people in the networking for the next 30 minutes. I feel more than ever, because a lot of us are doing this from home, it's really useful to get the networking in and just make some brief connections with people and do that on a friendly, fair basis, on a roulette basis. So once again, thank you, everybody. And thank you for being involved in this Sales Confidence session. Cheers.
Thanks all.